David was a man known in the region for his dog breeding. He had a reputation for being rigid, demanding, and without much patience for anything that didn't meet his expectations. It wasn't difficult to see that for him. Dogs were not companions or beings with feelings, but just tools for his business. And it was with that same cold look that he looked at Bella, his dog, and the puppy she had just given birth to. Bella was a strong and loyal dog with eyes that always sought to please her owner. Her cubs were small, fragile, and still depended on their mother's milk to survive. But for David, those puppies were useless. Unlike what he expected, they did not show the aggression or instinct that he considered valuable in the dogs he raised. In his mind, they were nothing more than a burden. That morning, David decided that he would not spend any more resources on Bella and her little ones. With the same nonchalance with which he would close a deal, he placed Bella and the puppies in the back of his old pickup truck and drove down a long dirt road surrounded by tall, dense trees. He didn't say a word, and Bella innocently continued to look at him with hope, not understanding what was coming. When he reached an isolated clearing in the middle of the forest, David stopped the car. With firm steps, he descended, pulling Bella by the leash while the puppies, still disoriented, stumbled to keep up. He didn't look back. With a quick and secure knot, he tied Bella to the trunk of a large tree while she watched him in silence, still believing that he had a good purpose for being there. "You're worthless," he said, his voice dry and devoid of any emotion. "You are of no use to me." Then, without looking back, he walked to the truck. Bella stood still, her eyes confused, still waiting for him to return. She wagged her tail once or twice, believing that it was only temporary, that her owner would return with water, food, or a new order. But the truck disappeared in the distance, and the sound of the engine was swallowed by the silence of the forest. David didn't look in the rearview mirror. For him, that was just a problem solved. As night fell, Bella began to understand that something was wrong. The cold of the darkness took over, and the puppies, fragile and hungry, began to cry. The forest, with its mysterious and ominous sounds, seemed more alive than ever. Bella, even though she was scared, gathered her strength to keep the puppies close, using her own body to protect them. She didn't know what was coming, but she felt like she needed to fight because now only she stood between her little ones and the cruel world that surrounded them. David, on the other hand, drove home without remorse. For him, Bella and the puppies no longer existed. His cold and merciless decision reflected the lack of compassion he carried in his heart. He would never have imagined that that cowardly act would begin a story of strength, struggle, and overcoming. A story that would show that true courage and loyalty are not born from abandonment, but from love and the instinct to protect. As the hours passed, Bella began to realize that David wasn't coming back. The noises of the forest, previously distant and muffled, seemed closer. Branches broke in the distance, the wind whistled through the trees, and other sounds she didn't recognize made her heart beat faster. Still, she couldn't afford to weaken. Her cubs needed her. Even though she was hungry and tired, she kept them close, licking them gently, trying to calm them down. The hunger began to hurt more, not only for Bella, but also for her cubs. Their fragile little bodies cried softly, seeking the warmth and milk that she no longer had the strength to produce. Bella felt despair growing inside her, but she remained firm. She couldn't give in to fear. She needed to resist. When the first ray of sunlight finally cut through the darkness of the forest, Bella felt a slight relief. Dawn seemed to bring a promise of hope. But that feeling didn't last long. When she turned to check on her cubs, she realized something was wrong. 4 of them lay still, their small bodies unresponsive to Bella's gentle touch. She tried to wake them up with her nose, licking them softly, but there was no response. They had succumbed to the cold and hunger of the night. Bella's heart broke. She felt a pain she had never felt before, as if something inside her was being ripped away. But even in the midst of grief, Bella knew she couldn't give in to despair. She still had live cubs that needed her. Weak, exhausted, and hungry, She struggled to her feet, gathered the remaining cubs close to her, and decided that she would fight for them. She didn't know how, but she would do whatever was necessary to protect them. That morning marked the beginning of a fight for survival. Bella, who had previously known only the security of a home life, now faced an unfamiliar and cruel world. But inside her, something began to change. A mother's instinct turned into a silent strength, and even in the face of all the pain, Bella began to explore the forest at first. Everything seemed impossible. Bella had never needed to hunt before. She was a dog raised by humans, used to receiving ready-made food without effort. Now, however, she felt something different. Her instincts, previously dormant, began to awaken. The smell of the air, the sounds of the forest, even the movement of the leaves on the ground seemed more alive, clearer. Bella knew she would need to rely on these senses to survive. The first hunting attempts were clumsy. Bella tried to chase a squirrel, but it was too fast. She tried to approach a mouse, but it escaped before she could act. Each failure made the hunger hurt even more, but Bella didn't give up. She kept trying, moving more carefully, watching every sound and every movement around her. Finally, after hours of effort, Bella was successful. She found a young rabbit distracted while feeding. This time, Bella moved patiently, crawling across the floor and approaching silently. When she was close enough, she jumped with all the strength she had. Her teeth closed on the rabbit, and for the first time Bella caught her prey. The raw meat was unlike anything she had ever eaten, but at that moment, it didn't matter. It was food. It was survival. After eating enough to regain some energy, Bella returned to her cubs with the rest. They snuggled around her, suckling harder now that her body had the energy to produce milk again. But there was still more work to do. Bella knew she needed to find water. Her sense of smell guided her through the forest, following a faint scent of dampness to a crystal-clear stream. She drank deeply, feeling the coolness of the water revitalize her tired body. As she returned to the place where her cubs were resting, Bella noticed something. The forest, which had once seemed scary, was now beginning to feel like home. Yes, it was full of danger, but it also offered everything she needed to keep her little ones alive. In the days that followed, Bella established a new routine. During the day, she explored the forest in search of food and water, learning to identify the smells and sounds that led her to her prey. At night, she stayed with her cubs, protecting them from the cold and the threats of darkness. Every day, Bella became stronger, more confident. Her cubs, which had previously seemed so fragile, began to grow, fueled by their mother's strength and determination. Bella had transformed. She was no longer just an abandoned dog. Now she was a fighter, a protector, and above all, a survivor. But life in the forest was still full of surprises. One morning, while walking in search of water to quench her puppy's thirst, Bella smelled a different smell in the air. It was something strong, a smell she didn't yet know well, but it made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She followed the trail cautiously, moving slowly, her senses heightened. The smell grew stronger as she approached a cave, partially hidden by vegetation. Bella hesitated for a moment. Instinct told her that there was danger there, but something stronger was pushing her forward. A low and faint sound came from inside the cave. They were small cries, sharp and helpless, that made Bella's heart sink. With careful steps, she entered the cave, the sunlight barely illuminating the dark interior, and there before her was the source of the smell and the sounds. On the cold floor, a wolf lay motionless, clearly lifeless. Beside her, 3 little wolf cubs were whimpering, their eyes still closed, unable to understand what had happened. The wolf seemed to have fought to the end to protect them, but now she was there, unable to take care of her little ones. Bella stood still, watching the scene. She felt a wave of sadness and empathy at what she saw. Something inside her knew exactly what those puppies were facing: abandonment, the fight for survival, the fear of the unknown. They were as vulnerable as her own cubs had been. For a moment, Bella considered retreating. She already had her own puppies to take care of. She already had a huge weight on her shoulders. But maternal instinct spoke louder. Without hesitating any longer, Bella slowly approached the wolf cubs. They were weak, but when they felt her presence, they tried to crawl towards the warmth of her body. Bella laid down next to them, allowing them to snuggle up next to her, mingling with her own puppies. She licked them gently as she did with her own, reassuring them and welcoming them as part of her family. The following days were of adaptation. The wolf cubs and Bella's cubs learned to live together. Despite their differences, they quickly bonded, forming a unique litter. Bella, in turn, divided her attention equally between everyone. She fed them, protected them, and guided them through the forest. It was a challenge greater than any she had faced, but Bella seemed to find strength she didn't even know she had. The wolf cubs were more agile and had sharp, wild instincts, while Bella's were more docile and attentive to her guidance. Together they began to explore the world around them, learning from each other. Bella watched them with pride. Her new family was an unlikely mix, but increasingly stronger and more united. The cave where she found the cubs became a safe haven for everyone. There they took shelter from the cold and the dangers of the forest. Bella, who once feared for her cubs' survival, now saw hope. She knew that raising them in that environment would be difficult, but she also knew that they were growing stronger every day. As she watched the puppies playing together, Bella realized that her mission had become even greater. It didn't matter whether they were wolves or dogs. To her, they were all hers. They needed her, and she would fight with all her might to ensure they had a chance to live. In that moment, Bella understood that her strength came not just from her desire to survive, but from the deep and unwavering love she felt for her family. She knew she was at a huge disadvantage. Then something unexpected happened. The wolf cubs, now young and stronger, came out of the shadow of the cave. With wild instincts awakened and uncommon courage, they stood by Bella's side, defying the invading wolves. Her canine brothers, inspired by her bravery, also began to move around, emitting small growls and barks. It was an unlikely scene. Wolf cubs and dogs united as one family, facing a much greater enemy. The invaders attacked, and the fighting was fierce. Bella and her cubs fought with everything they had, but the wolves were bigger, more experienced, and in greater numbers. With each blow, Bella felt her strength diminish. Despite her family's courage, the enemy seemed unbeatable. The cubs showed bravery, confusing the larger wolves with quick movements and coordinated attacks, but they were getting tired. Just when everything seemed lost, a sound cut through the air. A deep and powerful howl echoed through the forest, making everyone stop for a moment. Bella recognized that sound immediately. It was the Alpha who had spared her months ago. From within the fog he emerged with his pack, moving like swift, deadly shadows. The invading wolves, taken by surprise, hesitated. The Alpha wasted no time. He led the attack with precision and strength, his pack following close behind. In just a few moments the tide of the battle changed. The invading wolves, realizing they were at a disadvantage, began to retreat. Their leader let out a short howl, calling his pack to retreat, and one by one, they disappeared into the forest. When silence finally returned, Bella fell to her knees, exhausted. Her cubs, panting and covered in dirt, gathered around her. They were injured, but alive, and that was all that mattered. The Alpha approached Bella with firm steps, but his expression was not threatening. He touched his nose to hers in a gesture that seemed to say, "We were here to help." Then, with one last look, he led his pack back into the forest. Bella watched as they disappeared, feeling a mixture of relief and gratitude. The forest was still dangerous, but that day she saw that it wasn't all hostility. There were unexpected allies, even among the wild. Most importantly, she saw that her family, however unlikely, was stronger than any obstacle. Bella knew they would still face many challenges, but together they were prepared for anything. The battlefield, which had once been pure chaos, was now silent. The invading wolves, who had seemed so threatening and unbeatable, had disappeared into the forest, defeated and humiliated. The arrival of the Alpha and his pack had changed everything. Not only did they save Bella and her cubs, but they also showed that even in the wild, alliances could be formed in times of need. Bella, still panting, looked around. Her cubs were dirty, tired, but alive. That was all that mattered. She lowered her head for a moment, trying to catch her breath and process what had just happened. The strength of her cubs, the courage of the young wolves, and above all, the unexpected help of the alpha had been enough to survive. The big alpha approached Bella. He walked with calm confidence, his muscular body covered in scars that told stories of battles past. His golden eyes, so intense and expressive, locked onto Bella. There was no threat in his gaze, just a respectful calm. He stopped just a few steps away from her, and in that instant, it seemed like the entire forest held its breath. Bella raised her head, still weary but showing no fear. She knew that this wolf had the power to destroy her family, but he had chosen otherwise. When he touched his nose to hers, it was a simple gesture but full of meaning. It was as if he said, "I see you. I recognize your strength and your determination." At that moment, Bella felt something she had never imagined: mutual respect coming from a wild and powerful creature. The alpha then let out a short but loud howl. It was like a statement to his pack, who were still positioned in the shadows of the forest. With fluid movements, the wolves began to retreat, returning to the territory they had come from. Some of them looked at Bella and her family as they passed by, curious and perhaps even admiring. The alpha was the last to leave, but before disappearing into the trees, he gave Bella one last look, as if to say, "If you need us, we'll be here." When everything finally returned to silence, Bella felt a mixture of relief and pride. Her family had survived something that seemed impossible. Her pups, both dogs and wolves, were learning to be more than survivors. They were learning to be a team, a real family. And now, in this unforgiving forest, they knew they were not completely alone. The alpha's gesture was more than a simple touch or a look. It was a silent promise. Despite differences, there was understanding. These were not just alliances out of necessity, but a recognition of the strength and courage that Bella had demonstrated. She had become more than a mother or a leader to her cubs. Now she was a respected figure, even among the forest's most feared predators. Bella lifted her head, looking at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set, turning the sky orange and gold. The battle was over, but the journey continued. With her puppies around her and renewed determination in her heart, Bella knew that no matter what came, they would be ready to face it together. Somewhere in that wild expanse, she knew she had allies who respected her as much as she respected them. Days passed, and the forest remained the same, wild, unpredictable, full of challenges and dangers. But something was different now. Bella and her pups, a unique mix of dogs and wolves, were no longer just isolated survivors. They were a family, united not by blood, but by the bond they formed through hardship and the strength they found in each other. Each puppy grew visibly, developing its own skills. The young wolves showed incredible agility and wild instincts, while Bella's pups maintained unwavering loyalty and a constant desire to learn. Together, they formed a combination that no predator would underestimate. Bella's daily training prepared them for whatever the future brought. She taught them to hunt, to hide when necessary, and above all, to work as a team. The cave that was once a simple shelter now felt like a real home. At night, the cubs would snuggle around Bella, warming each other as the sounds of the forest echoed outside. It was a peaceful time, but Bella knew she needed to remain vigilant. The forest never rested, and new dangers could arise at any time. Still, there was something that gave Bella greater security than she had ever felt before: the alliance with the Alpha's pack. It was silent but firm. Every now and then, she would spot one or another member of the pack in the distance, watching but never invading her space. It was as if they were always nearby, ready to help if needed. Knowing this gave Bella a relief she rarely allowed herself to feel. One morning, as the puppies played near the stream, Bella watched intently. They ran, jumped, and playfully fought, a mix of brute strength and youthful mischief. It was impossible not to feel proud. Against all odds, they not only survived but were thriving. Every step, every day was proof that their union was stronger than any challenge. Bella lifted her head, the cold wind brushing past her face, bringing with it the familiar scent of the forest. She knew the journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new struggles, maybe even losses. But none of that made her afraid. Her strength came not only from her maternal instinct, but from the resilience that her unique family had built. Now, she wasn't just a leader. She was a mother, a protector, and the heart of a family that, despite its differences, was indivisible. Wolves and dogs, creatures from such different worlds, found a way to live and grow together. And as long as they stuck together, Bella knew they could face anything. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with warm shades of orange and gold, Bella gathered her cubs around her. With a firm gaze and a heart full of determination, she led them back to the cave. The forest kept calling them to challenges and adventures, but as always, they would go together, ready for whatever came. Because in the end, their strength wasn't just in their bodies, but in the unbreakable bond they had with each other. They were a family, a unique and resilient family, ready to flourish even in the most difficult terrain. And so ends the incredible journey of Bella and her unique family, a story of courage, resilience, and love that shows us how, even in the most difficult situations, unity and determination can overcome any obstacle. If this story touched your heart and inspired you in any way, leave a comment below and share what impacted you most. Don't forget to like to support our work and, of course, subscribe to the channel to follow more exciting stories like this. Activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your interaction is what motivates us to continue bringing content that makes a difference. Until next time.